Hey guys, tonight we drift back along the slow-moving waters of the ancient Nile. The moonlight slinking over reed beds, where the frogs hum like tired flutes and papyrus rustles with stories older than empires. You're standing barefoot on the edge of the riverbank, cool mud pressing between your toes. You spot a flash of silver beneath the surface tilapia, darting in lazy zigzags. Fish are everywhere here. The Nile is teeming with them. There's enough to feed an army, or in this case, a civilization. You'd think everyone ate them, but you're a priest in ancient Egypt. And tonight, you're absolutely not touching that fish. If you so much as nibble a catfish, your spiritual purity is toast. You'll be kicked out of the temple faster than you can say Osiris. You might be thinking, isn't this a bit dramatic? But welcome to a world where the divine and the daily intertwine, and where what's on your dinner plate has cosmic consequences. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where and when you're listening from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge through the pre-dawn haze toward the great temple complex at Karnak, still smelling faintly of incense and cool stone. You've already bathed twice this morning. Yes, twice. As a priest, you're expected to be cleaner than clean. Clean in body, clean in mind, clean even in your breath. Which is why some of your fellow priests won't speak the god's name aloud until they've rinsed with natron. And then there's what you eat. Because in this society, purity doesn't just mean prayers and white linen robes. It also means watching every bite you take. That slab of dried fish sizzling on your neighbor's fire. Off-limits. Strange, right? Egypt is a river civilization. Fish is cheap, abundant, and available almost year-round. It's not a luxury food. It's the food of the people. Markets in Memphis and Thebes are filled with vendors hawking smoked mullet, fried catfish, even tiny fish pressed into salty cakes. You can barely walk down a street without smelling it, but you, priest of the gods, float above that greasy fray. Fish is not for you. Not because it's scarce, not because it's expensive, but because it is, in your religious worldview, richly polluting. In fact, the Greek historian Herodotus, who, to be fair, loved a good exaggeration, claimed that many Egyptians wouldn't even touch fish, much less eat them. Now, that's a bit much. We know most people in Egypt absolutely did eat fish. But Herodotus was onto something. Some Egyptians, namely temple priests, avoided it with a passion. So why the fish ban? Part of the reason lies in Egypt's love affair with symbolism. Everything meant something. Cats represented protection, crocodiles, fear and power, and fish got the short end of the divine stick. Start with the Nile itself. A divine artery of life, sure, but also a bit messy. The river was sacred, yes, but also unpredictable. Floods brought fertile soil and life, but they also brought rot, disease, and occasionally, the unpleasant whiff of something long dead. Fish swam in this ambiguous boundary between clean and unclean, sacred and profane. They existed in the same liminal space as birth, decay, and death. And priests were all about boundaries, holding the line between the human and the divine. And then, of course, there was the smell. Oh yes, the smell. If you've ever caught and cleaned a fish on a hot day, you know what I mean. Fish has a very particular scent somewhere between briny and did something crawl under the floorboards. In Egypt's undrenched temples, where scent played a powerful spiritual role, think myrrh, cinnamon, blue lotus, the idea of trudging around reeking of Nile perch just wasn't going to cut it. Priests were expected to smell divine, literally. Fragrance was holy. Perfume wasn't just cosmetic, it was part of ritual, a sensory offering to the gods. So stinking of fish? That would be like showing up to a black tie event wearing wet socks and a meatball sub. One fringe theory even suggests that some fish were believed to carry impurities from the underworld, small, slippery vehicles of spiritual contamination. That's probably why priests not only abstained but also avoided even handling the stuff. Imagine trying to maintain an aura of divine serenity while hacking through scales and guts. Not the vibe. And yet, there were fish all around you, everywhere. You turned, someone was fishing, gutting, drying, salting. The contradiction was constant. This is where things get quietly fascinating. Because while you, a priest, must never taste fish, at least publicly, some scholars suspect that behind closed doors, the rules may have bent just a little, especially during famines, or if the temple kitchen accidentally used fish sauce in that barley stew. Historians still argue whether the fish taboo applied to all priests, or just the high-ranking ones involved in funerary rituals. It's also debated how strictly these rules were enforced outside the big temples, Was a humble provincial priest expected to stick to these laws, even if he was miles away from a major cult center? Unclear. But one thing is certain: in the sacred heart of Egypt's religious world, fish was more than just food. It was a statement, a boundary, a reminder that not everything plentiful is permitted, and that sometimes the things that sustain a nation are the very things its holy men must deny. So tonight, as the moon glints off the water and the scent of fried fish wafts downwind from the workers' village, you keep walking, past the river, past temptation, into the temple's shadows. You're a priest. You don't eat fish. You're still walking barefoot, your feet cooled by the ancient limestone path leading into the temple's inner sanctum. It's quiet here, well, mostly. The occasional clink of a copper basin, the slap of sandals, the whispered chant of a purification rite. You settle on a low stone bench beside a carved lotus column, the kind whose petals never wilt. And even in this serene place, fish are still on your mind. Why? Because the ban wasn't just a rule, it was a whole mood. Egyptian priests were expected to live in a state of spiritual readiness. You couldn't just show up to work like you rolled out of bed. No. You shaved your head every other day. You bathed 4 times a day. You changed into freshly laundered linen, with the obsessive frequency of a hypochondriac doing laundry during allergy season. Even your fingernails had to be clean, none of that under the nail grime the commoners could get away with. So imagine now sitting in the refectory, the simple dining space where the priest would eat their ritual meals. Everyone gets a portion of bread, maybe figs, cucumbers, and a sweet beer that's more porridge than pint. But when the acolyte walks in with a basket of roasted tilapia for the temple guards, he walks right past you. You get lentils instead. And it's not because the gods hate fun. It's because food was part of the spiritual body. What you ate could either align you with the divine or distance you from it. Fish. Well, fish were slippery literally and symbolically. To the Egyptians, the world was built on balance. Not the concept of order, justice. Cosmic alignment was everything. And fish, with their strange, shiny bodies and tendency to rot fast in the heat, symbolized decay, transience, and weirdly enough, unpredictability. They didn't stay where you put them. You can't hurt a fish. You can't predict where it'll dart. They were creatures of the in-between. And if you're trying to be a walking embodiment of math, unpredictability is not on the menu. Now, here's where things get weirder. Some fish were believed to be unclean because of their habits. Catfish, for instance, have barbels, those long whisker-like things, and like to rummage around at the bottom of the river, where all the silt and, well, less than pure substances collect. Egyptians noticed this. They didn't necessarily know about microbes, but they did know about smell, water quality, and the way certain fish were always lurking near the murky riverbed, suspiciously close to waste outlets and, let's say, crocodile byproducts. And then there's the sheer smell of fish. This again, I know, but you can't overstate it. In a land where temples were saturated with scents meant to lure the gods, blue lotus, cinnamon, sweet oils, a priest who smelled like he fell into a fish basket was not exactly divine material. Egyptian temples were essentially sensory theaters. Light filtered through stone slats in perfect lines. The echo of footsteps was designed to feel sacred. Every scent, every sound was calculated. So dragging the overpowering smell of rotting Nile fish into that environment, it would be like spraying cheap cologne in a perfume boutique, an offense to the senses and the gods. And here's a tidbit for your sleep brain to nibble on. There's some archaeological evidence that certain priestly quarters were deliberately built away from fish markets and riverside vendor stalls. That's right, temples may have been zoned like high-end real estate, just to avoid the smell of grilled carp. But let's pull back for a moment. Not all fish were equally offensive. Some were more taboo than others. The bolty fish, modern day tilapia, was often consumed by commoners and even showed up in funerary art, but rarely, if ever, in ritual contexts. Catfish and eel, big no-no for priests. They were associated with the underworld and in some myths even played sketchy roles in the divine drama. More on that in the next section. Brace yourself. Historians still argue whether fish was banned for symbolic reasons alone, or if there were practical motives. After all, fish spoiled quickly. In the Egyptian heat, without refrigeration, a nice Nile catch could go from dinner to biohazard within hours, and priests couldn't afford to get food poisoning. They were responsible for rituals, mummification, and guiding souls to the afterlife. Not exactly jobs you can do while hunched over with food cramps. One fringe but oddly charming theory suggests that fish were avoided simply because they were too earthy. Think of it like this. Fish were too normal, too pedestrian, too common. Priests needed to live apart from everyday life. They were supposed to be semi-divine, a bridge between humans and gods. eating the same stuff as fishermen. That would dilute the mystique. So what did they eat instead? A typical priestly meal might include bread, honey, dates, lettuce, which, in a fun twist, was a symbol of fertility, cucumbers, onions, and beans. Add in a little dried fruit and perhaps some goat cheese, and you've got yourself a very respectable sacred brunch. Was it boring? Sure. But hey, it didn't make the gods mad. And here's a funny contradiction to leave you with before we sneak deeper into temple lore. While priests couldn't eat fish, fish were sometimes used in medicine. That's right, a priest might scowl at your grilled tilapia, but turn right around and recommend powdered fish bones for a sore throat. Welcome to the wonderful inconsistency of ancient healthcare. As you sit now in your quiet chamber, sipping a thick, sweet beer and pretending not to envy the temple guard's fried perch, you feel the weight of the rules. You're not just avoiding fish, you're embodying a worldview. One where the sacred and the stinky can't coexist. One where purity is measured in choices as small as what lands on your plate. And in that choice, quiet, invisible, repetitive, you draw a line between the divine and the everyday. You don't cross it. You don't eat the fish. The torches flicker low in the temple corridors as you pad quietly through a passage, lined with painted gods. Gold leaf flakes gently from the walls, and the air smells of crushed myrrh, cool limestone, and something older than memory, older than myth. You pass a carved image of Osiris, green-skinned and serene, flanked by Isis and Nephthys, and your fingers instinctively touch the amulet at your chest. Not out of fear, out of reverence, because now we're getting into the part of the story where things get a little awkward. For the gods, see, some people say the priest avoided fish not because fish were impure, not because of their smell, and not even because of their muddy riverbed hangouts, but because of something far more embarrassing. There's a myth, a strange one you're not supposed to talk about too loudly in the temple. It goes something like this. Osiris, the beloved god king, ruler of the dead, was murdered by his jealous brother Set, chopped into pieces and scattered across Egypt. His loyal wife, Isis, found all the pieces, almost all. Because as legend has it, one part of Osiris was missing. Yes, that part. According to one version of the tale, it was tossed into the Nile and swallowed by a fish. Some versions say a tilapia. Others suggest a catfish. The scholars can't quite agree on the species, but one thing is clear. The fish that ate Osiris's, shall we say, royal scepter, became a symbol of cosmic disrespect. And if you're a priest sworn to honor Osiris in life and death, are you really going to chow down on the animal that defiled his divine anatomy? Yeah, probably not. That myth alone could explain a centuries-long side-eye toward the entire fish kingdom. You can feel the divine cringe ripple through history. It's hard to bless a meal that once starred in a cosmic body horror tale. Now, here's the funny part. The story isn't hidden in obscure scrolls. It shows up in temple carvings, funerary texts, and even in the writings of later Greeks and Romans who loved collecting Egyptian myths like Pokemon cards. They couldn't get enough of these fishy god stories, though. The Egyptians themselves treated them with more restraint. That's the thing about mythology, it filters down into daily practice. A tale once whispered in temple courts becomes a ritual law, and over time, a symbolic fish ban becomes a cultural reflex. You might not even remember why you don't eat fish. You just don't. But it doesn't stop there. You shuffle further into the sanctum, past a priest reciting litanies under his breath. In your hand is a scroll listing temple offerings, fruits, honey, beer, bread shaped like the sun. But never, ever, fish. It's not just the Osiris thing. There are other deities with strange fishy footnotes. Take Set, the chaotic dessert god. Sometimes he's associated with fish, especially strange or aggressive ones. In one obscure myth, fish actually help Set escape from the gods by disguising him in the reeds. In another, the fish take on his character Trixie, hard to catch, a little too smart for their own scales. Not exactly the kind of spiritual company priests want to keep. And what about Hatmiet, a lesser-known fish goddess worshipped in a few northern towns? She had the head of a fish and was associated with fertility and the Nile's bounty. But she was a regional deity, never part of the big league state pantheon. So her association with fish didn't redeem them, it just tucked them safely away into the category of other people's gods. Historians still debate whether these myths created the taboo, or whether the taboo created the myths. Did priests avoid fish because of the Osiris story? Or did someone invent that story to justify an already existing ban? The records are murky. Like the Nile in late flood season, scholars argue in circles, waving their papyrus fragments and drinking too much conference wine. But you don't need certainty. You have tradition. You kneel in the dark now, facing a shrine, The air is thick with incense. You're fasting, meditating, preparing for a ceremony where you'll speak the words of gods, act as their vessel, guide the souls of the dead. You feel clean, light, ready. And the last thing you want to think about is some cheeky catfish who once ate a divine phallus. You suppress a smirk. Even in ancient Egypt, where death was serious business and eternity hung in the balance, people probably giggled about that part. Just a little, but not you. You're a priest. You keep your composure. You don't eat fish. You barely think about fish. Still, you wonder. When you see an old fisherman by the river, pulling in a tangled net of wriggling mullet, you wonder what he thinks about the myths. Does he believe them? Does he care? Probably not. He's got mouths to feed. But you carry something heavier. You carry memory, ritual, story. You carry the burden of honoring gods in the smallest actions, each sip of water, each bite of bread. And so, while the world outside the temple may laugh, may feast, may forget, you remember. You remember the myths, the stories that make rules out of riddles, and you uphold them. You do not eat fish. The sun has dipped lower now, casting the stone walls in amber hues. You stand beneath a lintel carved with falcons and lotus flowers, the smell of warm dust rising around you as the air cools. A soft wind moves through the columns, and your linen robe rustles like a whisper. This part of the temple is quieter, more private, the domain of those who deal not just with gods, but with the dead. Tonight, you're on duty, not for a sacrifice, not for him, but for a funeral preparation. And once again, you won't be needing any fish. You step into the embalming house. The air thickens, part frankincense, part antiseptic, part something else that clings to your nostrils even when you've left. You nod at the embalmers. Their hands darkened by resin and natron. They're priests too, in a way specialized. Technical, surgical. They don't just preserve bodies, they prepare souls for eternity. And part of that process, ritual meals. Now here's the thing. When Egyptians prepared the dead for the afterlife, they did it with feasts, not real feasts, usually, but symbolic ones, offerings carved into tomb walls, placed in jars, laid out beside the body in carefully ordered displays. Loaves of bread, onions, beer, dates, a slab of meat from the right thigh of a bull, but not fish. It's conspicuously absent. You crouch beside a low table, where a scribe is etching out a list of offerings to be included in a tomb's inventory. This was standard practice. The dead needed sustenance in the afterlife, and the more detailed your list, the better your spiritual catering service. But across hundreds of tombs, spanning centuries, a pattern holds true. While you'll occasionally see fish in the tombs of commoners or minor officials, it rarely appears in the tombs of priests, nobles, or royalty. Why? Because death wasn't just a pause in the narrative. It was a sacred transformation. The body became divine, the soul merged with the stars, and you couldn't feed a god something that was, in priestly eyes, spiritually suspicious. Imagine placing a nice salted perch beside the embalmed remains of a high priest. It would be like serving fast food at a royal wedding, disrespectful, disruptive, and possibly spiritually dangerous. Instead, you bring dates, figs, bread shaped like the pillar of Cyrus's spine, a symbol of stability. You anoint the corpse with oils and chant from the Book of the Dead. You light incense that curls in tight, fragrant spirals above the shrouded face. You've done this so many times, you can practically chant the offerings in your sleep. Still, you pause tonight. Something feels different. Maybe it's the quiet. Maybe it's the way the scribe hesitates over the name of the deceased. Or maybe it's just you, imagining things again. You remember being younger, asking one of the older priests why fish were never given to the dead. They wouldn't eat it, he said, flatly. But why? You asked. He stared out at the river. Would you want your soul weighed down by something that swims backward? It wasn't a real answer, but it stuck with you. And to be fair, it's not that fish were never depicted in tomb art. They sometimes show up in lively scenes, people fishing, netting, salting, but they're almost always in the context of life, not the afterlife. You never see fish set neatly in offering tables drawn for eternity. It's like they belong to the realm of the living, messy, fleeting, and wet. The realm of the dead. That needed order. And priest had to model that order in everything they did. You were a microcosm of the universe, a walking symbol of divine truth. The gods didn't get cheat days. Neither did you. Historians still debate just how universal this food taboo was in funerary practice. Some point to exceptions. A small tomb in Lower Egypt, for instance, with a carved relief showing a man presenting fish to a seated couple. But most agree, if fish were offered, it was to humans, never to the gods, and rarely by the clergy. Tonight, As the embalming is finished and the rituals completed, you return to the outer chamber. You wash your hands with water steeped in sacred herbs. You press a lotus blossom to your chest and inhale. And for just a moment, you imagine the soul of the departed floating upward, unburdened by the weight of earthly flavors, especially those of the scaly, smelly kind. You glance out the window slit toward the city beyond the temple. You can just make out the glow of fires by the river bank, where people gather to eat, laugh, and yes, grill fish. There's no shame in it for them. They are not priests. They live in the rhythms of the everyday, not the rituals of eternity. And maybe, just maybe, you envy them a little. Not for the fish, but for the freedom. Still, you tuck that feeling away. You chose this path, and it is one paved with clean hands, sacred silence, and meals that never swim. You rise, another death prepared, another soul on its way. And still, no fish. You're walking home now, the temple behind you, the river ahead. The night air is warm, but no longer heavy. The moon hangs low over the Nile like a coin dropped into dark water. You take the long way past the food stalls just outside the temple walls, the ones priests aren't really supposed to linger near. But tonight, you do. Just for a moment, there's something comforting about the smell of it all. Fresh onions sizzling in oil, ground barley cakes browning on clay griddles, the unmistakable sizzle of fish hitting a hot pan, fried tilapia, seasoned with coriander and garlic. Your stomach growls, and you laugh softly, to yourself. You haven't tasted fish in years. The vendor calls out to you without even turning around. You watching or buying, Holy One. You wave him off. He shrugs. Suit yourself. More for us. You wander farther into the marketplace. The stalls are makeshift but efficient baskets of dried fish stacked in neat pyramids. Little earthen jars filled with fish paste, the kind used to season porridge or pickle vegetables. Somewhere, a child is gnawing on a smoked mullet, holding it like a lollipop. It's normal. It's everywhere. Because for the average Egyptian, fish isn't forbidden. It's survival. It's cheap. And that matters. Egypt is wealthy in some ways, but unequal in others. Not everyone can afford beef or goose or those nice honey-glazed pigeon skewers the priests get at festivals. Fish, though, fish is for the people. It's what's hauled out of the Nile every morning. Scaled and gutted by noon, smoked or salted by evening, it's accessible protein. And it's adaptable boiled, fried, dried, buried in hot sand, or turned into stew. You pass by a woman scaling fish in a rhythm so fluid it looks choreographed. You pause again, watching. She hums a lullaby as she works, talking softly to her daughter, who's wrapping leaves around another fish to roast. And you wonder, do they know the story? The Osiris myth, the fish that swallowed what shouldn't be swallowed. Maybe, maybe not. There's an odd tension here. The priesthood and the people, the sacred and the daily. You don't resent them for eating what you can't, but you notice the divide more clearly at moments like this when hunger hums in your belly, and smell is more powerful than doctrine. Now, if we're being honest, and we are, it's likely that not every priest followed the fish ban perfectly. There are hints, quiet ones, in temple records and food inventories. Once, in an archive buried under the sand for 2,000 years, someone cataloged dried fish for non-public use. It could have been for servants, or it could have been an indulgence, tucked into the corner of a private storeroom, waiting for someone to sneak a bite when no gods were looking. Historians still argue whether these were breaches in practice or just exceptions granted to lower-level temple workers. Some suggest regional differences played a role. Temples in the Delta, closer to fishing towns, may have been more flexible than those in the Theban heartland. Still, the official stance, especially in state-run cults, was firm: priests do not eat fish. And that made fish something peculiar. Not just food, but identity. You see, to eat fish in ancient Egypt didn't just nourish you, it marked you. It meant you were not a priest. It meant you belonged to the world of labor, of trade, of the fertile mud along the banks of the Nile. It meant you were real, human, messy, and to refuse it, that meant something too. It meant you were bound to the world of the gods, expected to live a little apart, to scrub your skin clean for times a day, to chant the names of ancient beings, to touch the bones of kings, and to go to bed on an empty stomach. While the rest of the country smelled like fried fish. Was it worth it? You reach your doorway, a simple courtyard house shaded by a fig tree. You sit on a low stool, loosen your sandals, and pour water over your dusty feet. You breathe in. You're tired, but calm. It was worth it. Not because you think you're better, but because the rules matter. The boundaries matter. They're what keep the chaos out. What keep the world spinning. The sun rising, the Nile flooding. Tomorrow, you'll rise again before dawn. Bathe in the cold, sweet water. Whisper the old names Avoid temptation, avoid fish, and maybe, just maybe, on your way back, you'll stop again at the market, not to buy, not to eat, but just to smell, because sometimes memory is flavor enough. You smile, rest your head against the wall, and listen to the wind rustling through the fig leaves. Asterisk asterisk now. As you settle beneath your blanket and the night grows soft around you, let your breath slow with the current of the Nile. Imagine the warm breeze brushing against your cheeks, carrying with it the scents of lotus and limestone, mingling with the distant echo of temple chants. You're far from the marketplace now, far from duty, from doctrine, from any thought of what is forbidden or pure. You're just floating. The river rocks you gently, not with waves, but with stillness. Papyrus brushes your fingertips. The moon glows just above your eyes, round and patient. Stars blink softly in the blackening sky. Their light slow, an ancient light that has watched over this same river for 5,000 years. You are nothing more than a breath in the desert, a speck of incense smoke, a ripple in the water. And it's enough. The gods don't speak. The fish don't swim. Even the cicadas pause. You are held. Let that calm carry you now. Let it wrap around your shoulders like linen. Let your heart beat slow. Let your thoughts loosen, drift, and dissolve into this quiet space between day and dream. You've done enough for today. Sleep well, priest. Sleep well, traveler of time.